Hi everyone, it's me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alanna and I'm a Canadian, but I have been living here in the UK for the last 6 years. And on today's video, I'm going to share 5 misconceptions I had about the UK. If you like this video and you want to see more videos of what it's truly like being a foreigner living in the UK, please consider subscribing. But without further ado, let's go. One of the first misconceptions I had about the UK is that it's always raining. Now, I found this graph online that compares the average monthly rainfall between London and Toronto. Now, I am from outside of Toronto and I now live outside of London, so I thought it's an interesting comparison. And when you look at it, so the numbers basically tell us that on average, London has about 30 days more of having rainfall, of some level of rainfall. But if you actually look at the graph, so if you see Toronto, the green line, there's hardly any rainfall in like December, January, February, where London has a lot of rain. And the reason for that is because in Toronto, it's snowing. So it's kind of like a pick your poison. Would you rather have on average about 30 days more of rainfall, or would you rather have snow during that time? You gotta pick one. For me personally, as a Canadian, people always say, oh, you're Canadian, you must love the snow. No, snow is wonderful to look at. Snow is wonderful at Christmas time when you're opening presents and there's snow lightly falling outside the window. Yeah, sure, it's pretty to look at, but commuting to work in the snow, not fun. One of the jokes here in the UK is that if there is any amount of snow here, especially in the south, everything shuts down, businesses close, trains and buses are canceled, everybody is just sent home, even if it's just a couple of inches of snow, which personally I love, because in Canada, in Ontario, where I'm from, things to be canceled due to snow have to be like extremely severe. So I have many memories of trying to dig my car out of a giant snowbank. I'm driving to work on ice. Work expects me to be there on time, whether we've had a snowstorm or not. So personally, I don't mind the extra 30 days or so of rain, when for me, the alternative would be snow. It's just my humble opinion. But the misconception that here in the UK it is always raining, obviously not really true, is it? Another misconception that I had about the UK is that I, as a foreigner, as a Canadian, will never fit in. The whole point of my YouTube channel is to show the ups and the downs of living abroad, the pros and the cons, the adventures and the naps, and I always try to be very brutally honest about my experience. I'm not gonna sugarcoat any of it, and let me tell you, the first 5 months living in England, I call the months of living hell, because quite frankly, it was hell. Everything was overwhelming. Everything was just like slightly different. Not necessarily hugely different, but it was just like everything was just slightly different. So it was really just overwhelming and just, it was tough. And I honestly thought at the beginning that there would be no way that as a foreigner, as a Canadian, as who I was and am, I would never fit in. And this has turned out to be a misconception. Having lived in the UK for the last 6 years, and hopefully for many more years, perhaps, who knows, I definitely feel at home here. I feel at peace. I feel accepted to a certain level. Obviously, there are times when I interact with people that it's a negative experience, you know? There's definitely been times when I am in a conversation with someone and they have a rant about foreigners are ruining this country. I'm just like, hey guy, that's me. But on the whole, Brits have been very accepting, very friendly, very welcoming, very kind. And I do truly feel like I fit in, that I am at peace and I am at home. And I honestly didn't think that was possible, especially at the beginning, with everything being different and everything is overwhelming. I thought there's no way I'm ever going to fit in. And thankfully, this one was a misconception. Another misconception I had about the UK before actually living here is that the food is a bit gross. On my YouTube channel, one of my favorite videos to do are taste tests. So I have taste tested so much British food, British snacks, British alcohol and drinks, and doing baking and cooking videos and stuff, trying so many different types of British food. And yeah, some of them are not my cup of tea. Marmite, I'm looking at you. But it's definitely a misconception that British food is bland or bad or gross. Some of it is, we have to say that, some of it is, but most of it isn't. I also think that as a Canadian, I'm quite jealous that Brits have a cuisine. Like when you think about British food, you can actually think of certain items. Whereas in Canada, when you think of what's Canadian food? Everybody says poutine. It's like, okay, what else? Tim Hortons maybe. But that's not food, that's just a cafe chain. So what is Canadian food? It's a good question, and it's kind of hard to answer. So even though sometimes people have this misconception that British food is bland or outdated or whatever, I'm actually quite jealous that Brits have a cuisine, because coming from Canada, we just don't really have like traditional dishes. There's very little that is unique to Canadian food or Canadian food that you can't get other places. Of course, there are certain things, like I would do things for a bag of all dressed chips. I miss them. I love them. They are a staple in Canada. But those are just potato chips, you know? So much of Canadian food you can get elsewhere. It's not necessarily unique to Canada. And when it comes to poutine, I don't even really like poutine. I think fries should be crispy. They shouldn't be coated in gravy. So thankfully, it is a misconception that British food is bland or boring or outdated or weird or whatever. Some of it is gross. Jellied eels. That seems to be a thing in Kent, and I don't know why. But overall, the food here is good. It's fun to try new stuff, and it is so much fun to try new British food and then find something that I'm like, oh my God, I love this. Another misconception I had about the UK before living here is that all places are beautiful and historical with gorgeous architecture, just like what you see on TV. That is obviously definitely not true. There are certainly places here in the UK that are absolutely beautiful, picturesque. It's kind of like what you think in your mind as a foreigner, what the UK looks like. Gorgeous architecture and historical monuments and manors and all that kind of wonderful history stuff. But it's also obviously very important to remember that all of the UK is not like that. And more likely than not, you are probably, as a foreigner, going to live in, a suburb that looks like any other suburb. And there's nothing too beautiful necessarily about it. It's just a neighborhood. It's not historical. It's not got beautiful pillars and famous people used to live there. No, you're probably going to live in a suburb in a neighborhood. And that's just life. Obviously, TV and movies are to blame for this one. There are so many films and TV shows that depict the UK as like this beautiful, historical, architecture-filled, beautiful, beautiful. You know what I mean? But the UK is home to places that are ugly, and worn out and dirty and dangerous, just like any other country. So just because you see these beautiful thatched roof cottages on TV does not mean you're gonna end up living in one. But hopefully the rent of your flat, maybe it's not like super beautiful or super special, but hopefully the rent is cheap enough that you can then go out and travel and see all of these beautiful places, because they do exist, but you're probably not gonna live in one. Another misconception I had about the UK before actually spending time here is that I would rather live in London. Now, when I first came to the UK, my partner is from Kent, so I moved down to Kent in the southeast of England. And at the beginning, I thought that I was gonna miss out because I wasn't living in London. So many people online, like YouTube channels or other expats that I was connecting with online, they all lived in London. And it was like this cool thing, this big city life. And I really felt like I was going to regret not giving that a try, or I was going to miss out by not living in London, and that living in a town or a city, like small city or even a village, is just going to be boring and I'm going to miss out on the true British experience. And this one was completely wrong. Now, I love visiting London. London is an incredible city. There is so much to see and eat and drink and do. And every time I go to London, I always see something new. I always experience something new. You will never be able to see all of it or experience all of it. And that is really cool. But let me tell you, I always feel happy and relieved when I'm on the train home. So I have learned that even though so many people online and so many people on YouTube and Instagram and whatever tend to live in London, you know, the expats go to London, that is not necessarily for me, because let me tell you, over the last 6 years, I've lived in a variety of different places, and I have learned that I like the English town, the English village. I just like that kind of vibe that fits with me, and I am not missing out by not living in London. I also think it's really important, and it's another big misconception, that London represents the entire UK, right? And we know that is not true, not even in the slightest. It's kind of like saying Toronto represents all of Canada or New York City represents all of the US. It couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, London, wonderful. I have nothing against London, but it is certainly not for me, and it's not a place that I would ever benefit from living in. Some people love it, and that's absolutely cool, and you're just gonna have to make that decision for yourself. But living in a small English village now and previously, and hopefully in the future, is definitely my place. So I'm happy to visit London, not gonna live there. And I'm certainly not gonna pay to live there either. That's a separate topic. I don't think it's necessarily embarrassing or shameful to have misconceptions about a place, because there is no way to truly know a place until you live and work there. There are so many places that I've been very lucky and privileged to travel to, and I think, wow, I love this place. I'd love to live here. But obviously, I really don't know what it's like. It's one thing to visit, like I went to Copenhagen and I loved it. It was such a cool city, but I went and it was like the middle of August. It was beautiful weather. It was sunny. It was great. And I was like, yeah, I could totally live here. But obviously I've never experienced a winter in Copenhagen. I've never worked in Copenhagen. I've never had to commute to work in Copenhagen. And you don't really know a place until you do all of like the day-to-day monotonous, boring stuff of life. That's kind of grim, isn't it? But you don't know until you do the day-to-day stuff, because holidays and vacations are one thing, but they're not really a representation of what it's like to be there. So I think having misconceptions about a place is fair. It's totally okay. It's kind of hard to avoid. But when you actually move someplace and you work there, you start commuting on the bus, and the bus is delayed or the bus gets canceled, and you have to walk home in the rain, and it gets dark at 4 p.m. and you're paying your national insurance and your tax, and you're counting up your bills, then you start to realize what it's truly like. And even though I've been here for 6 years, there's still a lot more that I'm learning. There's still so much of British culture that I am experiencing for the first time, or I am learning about. I love a learning experience, so I'm very happy to learn. But even now, I am still learning, and I'm still discovering some misconceptions that I had that are not true. If you want to see more content of what it's really like being a foreigner in the UK, make sure to check out this video where I share all my embarrassing stories being a foreigner living in the UK. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!